is Andy. I work as a cybersecurity engineer for VISIONSPACE. In this presentation, I will talk to you about offensive security testing and how it falls in the context of space-related software systems. I will also present you with how we use these strategies in order to find previously undiscovered vulnerabilities in different mission control systems, and then what we have learned from those assessments. But first, quick word about VISIONSPACE. Founded in 2011, we operate mainly in cyberspace and defense industries, and we are based in Portugal and Germany. Now, every space mission is heavily driven by critical software that spacecraft operators use in order to manage their spacecraft assets, space assets. And it just happens that it is the software that is present in every single element of the space mission. On the space segment, we obviously have onboard software. The ground segment is composed of a variety of different software systems to support mission control, ground stations, flight dynamics, mission planning, and many other auxiliary systems that integrate all those components together. And also the user segment is driven by the software for different purposes. For instance, planning of the execution of onboard instruments or all sorts of data processing activities. The ground segment consists of many interconnected elements, all of which have different functions, obviously, but also all of them depend on each other, and either by receiving input from or sending output to other elements of the ground segment. However, in most cases, those software systems, they don't require user interaction, with one major exception, which brings us to the mission control system. And MCS, mission control system, is the main interface to the other ground segment components. It is also obviously primary interface between the user, which are the spacecraft controllers, and spacecraft itself, which makes it one of the most critical components in the ground segment, and arguably the most vulnerable one, because as we all know, the weakest link in an information system is humans. For decades, the mission control systems were operated exclusively within confines of the mission control rooms, accessible only by selected group of individuals and only from limited workstations. This paradigm has recently shifted, however, with organizations that enable their employees and personnel to operate space missions remotely, including from comfort of their homes. Now, this increased accessibility has rendered space-related systems susceptible to the same security vulnerabilities as any other software system we use daily. Despite the adoption of newer technology stacks, either by partial replacement or upgrades or complete replacement by the newer mission control systems, the consideration for security requirements, I think, that has often been deferred still to the latest stage of the development process or overruled completely. And of course, this presents significant risk, exposing space sector to potential exploitation by malicious entities. Like in any other technology domain, merely expanding strategies to include security aspects, imposing security policies, and introducing security requirements is a good first step, but unfortunately, it is insufficient. And also, despite being developed by many extensive teams, presumably adhering to the best practices, we have observed firsthand how contemporary mission control systems are still susceptible to many very basic security flaws. So the question is, what can you do about it? And I think the best approach to handle these issues is to employ the offensive security strategies in the development lifecycle. Now, what is offensive security? It refers to a range of proactive security strategies, as we know, that use the same tactics as malicious actors in real-world attacks in order to strengthen the security posture of organization assets. It consists of penetration testing, red teaming, and vulnerability assessment. The penetration testing is a security test that most of you probably know mocks the real cyber attack in order to find vulnerabilities in the system. It is used to test software applications, networks, hardware, and also personnel. It can be conducted using the white, gray, and black box methodologies. And then, on the other hand, red teaming is an activity that is a thread-led penetration testing, which, on top of what you will get from penetration testing, this technique also tests capabilities of organization in terms of incident response and incident detection. And then vulnerability assessment is continuous discovery, prioritization, and resolution of security threats and vulnerabilities. And it should not be confused with vulnerability scan, which, as you will see later, is absolutely insufficient to discover the type of vulnerabilities we are discovering in our real-world applications. In addition, whether we use a penetration testing or red team engagement, it should never be one of activity. It should always be a periodically scheduled activity, and definitely should be one that is executed after every major release of the software or any system. But how does it actually help? First of all, it goes beyond the ticking of requirements. It finds unknown or new vulnerabilities in the system by testing for cases that neither developers nor the requirements have foreseen. And then it goes and tries to exploit those vulnerabilities. This approach not only increases the overall security posture of a company, but it also demonstrates a potential impact on the system, which then, of course, helps the risk management teams to make better informed decisions. To demonstrate this, we have recently conducted a number of vulnerability assessments of the more established open source mission control systems, like NASA OpenMCT and also IMCS. We have conducted those assessments using the white box testing approach, which involve both static and dynamic code analysis. Once the vulnerability were discovered, we followed the responsible disclosure process. We then communicated the findings with the vendors and supported them with fixing those issues. And then we, of course, requested CVE numbers in order to help with tracking those issues. Just in a couple of weeks, we discovered significant amount of system flaws, which range from medium to critical severity and allow potential malicious actors to conduct series of different attacks, from stealing user credentials to interacting with backend functionalities such as databases, and deleting the arbitrary files on the server, or even potentially gaining remote code execution on the target system. I'm sure at this point, one of the questions that comes to mind is what is the actual impact? And I think that's a very good question. In fact, this is one of the questions we ask ourselves as well before we report any of the discovered vulnerabilities. And this is where the offensive security testing makes a huge difference comparing to vulnerability scanning. Every vulnerability we discover using this approach, we first put in the context, and then we go and try to exploit in order to demonstrate the actual impact of that vulnerability. Looking at this list, you are probably thinking or wondering how come that the simple XSS vulnerability can have such a huge impact? And the reality is that in most of the cases, it doesn't. However, when you combine one of those vulnerabilities with other vulnerabilities, this is actually when it can render very, very high impact issues. And this is yet another advantage of offensive security approach, where we go and take those small vulnerabilities, chain them together in the one exploit, and then execute it in order to render actual impactful results. So for instance, a simple XSS in combination with directory traversal can render a sensitive information disclosure, like in case of MCS. And in that case, we were able to retrieve any arbitrary file on the system, which also led us to discover the configuration files and with user credentials, which were unfortunately stored in the plaintext, which then, of course, we can use to log into the system as normal users, as a valid users. In case of OpenMCT, one example was when we were training the XSS with CSRF vulnerabilities in order to interact with the backend functionalities, such as databases. And then it just happens that OpenMCT comes with a plugin that the users can use with a plugin for MCS comes with a plugin that the users can use to operate OpenMCT as a frontend, with MCS as a backend. And when those two systems are used, you can then train many other exploits, like in this case, vulnerabilities, like in this case, XSS CSRF on OpenMCT, and MCS on arbitrary the arbitrary file deletion on MCS, in order to now the attackers can actually conduct the arbitrary file deletion on the backend server, which in that case was MCS. But all that was possible thanks to the XSS vulnerability that was discovered in OpenMCT. So it is all about training the vulnerabilities. It is very tempting to make shortcuts, especially in the world where automation tasks take over many of automation takes over many tasks which were up until now conducted manually. You might be thinking right now that if there was a proper mechanism in place, like a static code analysis, somewhere down the development process in DevSecOps pipeline, for instance, those vulnerabilities would be detected and caught before the software went for the production. However, in this case, this was not the case. As you can see on this slide, most of the better part of the vulnerabilities we discovered were using the white box pen testing. But of course, there were also quite few discovered using the vulnerability scanners. So where does that leave us? I think the most appropriate answer is that we absolutely have to employ both approaches in order to better ensure the security of our software products. And just to conclude, this is simple vulnerability scans are not completely useless, obviously. Let's take a static code analysis of the SCOS 2000 machine control system as an example. By simple execution of a tool called Flow Finder, we were able to highlight a rather big number of vulnerabilities, or potential vulnerabilities, especially in the area of the classic buffer overflows. However, looking at those overwhelming results, how do we know which ones will actually require a fix and which will be properly handled later down the code execution or execution flow? This is something that we don't know. And in addition, as we've seen in previous examples, are these all vulnerabilities, or are we going to find many more once you start digging into the code, analyze the logic and the behavior of the application under different circumstances. And this is just to say that I think it is yet, in order to answer those questions, again, we have to employ the offensive security strategies, and in order to make sure that we can answer them. And I think that was the. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for the talk. Now it's time for some questions. Okay, great.
So, as you mentioned yourself, humans are the weakest link of any defense, realistically. And you mentioned vulnerability testing, pen testing, red teaming, but do you also include social engineering, like phishing in some of these training scenarios, attack scenarios, sorry?
Right. Yes, that's true. You should also include them as well. But these are, very often, these are part of the penetration testing, like initial reconnaissance, especially in the red teaming engagement, and they are defined by the scope of the activities you are conducting, so that's given. That's yes, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the comment.
Okay, thank you. And one more question. You also mentioned static and dynamic testing. Do you use any generic tools for that? Like, let's say, for example, SonarQube, or is that something specific for the space industry that I personally don't know about?
It's just a software. It's the same development stacks like in any other applications. You use the same tools to analyze, especially for the static analysis. You use the exact same tools as any other software application. Yeah.
Okay,
There's nothing special about it other than someone has to do it.
Okay.
Any other question in the room? Okay, there are no questions online, so thank you again, Andy, for the talk.
Thank you.